Hello there, this is Redjoy, and this is going to be a new look at Rangers and their kits for Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition. So the Ranger has a reputation of being, in kind of classic fantasy literature, of being the well-intentioned woodland fighter. They're the ones who go out into the wilderness to fight against the monsters and the creatures. They're the ones who are most likely to be someone similar to like Robin Hood or Legolas from Lord of the Rings. In fact, Strider or Aragorn is also a ranger as well. And it's very easy to look at them as being a super skilled, awesome fighter. And they can be, but they do have major limitations and things that are challenges to their role as being a fighter. I'm going to talk about what are some differences between a ranger and a fighter, and what makes them gives them additional challenges and gives them additional benefits over the fighter. And we'll talk about how their kits play out when they are playing along. To talk about them in general, they, like a fighter, they can wear any level of armor and helmets and shields. So they have that going for them. They can use the same types of weapons that a fighter can use, and they will oftentimes get the similar role of being the frontliner in combat. At least definitely in Baldur's Gate 1 and for a bit into Baldur's Gate 2 and also Throne of Bhaal. To give a few of their differences, a ranger can't become a master or a grandmaster in any weapon. They can only specialize, and they can only put 2 spots or 2 points into any weapon that a fighter would normally be able to use. The trade-off is that it allows for the ranger to have much more versatility with the weapon choices that they have. It's very common for rangers to have a missile weapon and a few melee weapons as different weapons that they can use, even though they're not going to be getting as many number of attacks or hit as hard with those in the weapons that they chose. If they're going into a dungeon or a particular area, they are more likely to find things that they can use and use really well compared to a fighter. In addition, they start off right off the bat with 2 points into 2-weapon fighting. I'm not really sure what the logic behind this is, but it is actually kind of a nice boost, right? Is that right away you can become a pretty good 2-weapon fighter without having to spend that many points into whatever you want to put points into. So that's not a bad effect for the early game. They also get to select a racial enemy. We'll talk about a couple of racial enemies that would be good choices a little later on, but having a racial enemy gives you a +4 bonus to hit and to damage against that enemy. It means that the ranger is particularly trained of how to kill that particular type of enemy. That's actually a pretty cool ability. They get a couple of unique skills and abilities on top of that. They can charm animals. That's not great because animals aren't super strong, but if you want to have in the early game to charm a wolf or charm a bear and have it join you in combat, it's not the end of the world. You could do far worse. They can, if they're wearing anything under studded leather armor, so no armor, leather armor, or studded leather armor, they can use hide and shadows, and that'll scale up as they level up. So it's kind of nice. They can sneak around like a thief can, and they can get druidic spells starting at level 8. So that is going to give them the capability to defend themselves. Now, I'm going to point this out when I talk about the Paladin. Paladin gets something very similar in the fact that they can cast cleric spells starting at level 9, is that when they start to cast their spells, they're going to be considered to be a level 1 caster. So it's going to be a little bit behind. So when you cast, for example, Armor of Faith, you're casting that the first 5 levels as if you are a level 1 druid and you're casting it at the low levels. So it's not going to be super powerful right away. But think about it, like if you get Entangle right away and you are casting it when you get to level 8, that might have an effect, especially if you enjoy shooting at your opponents and taking them out from a distance. You can at least hold them in one spot in case of an emergency. It's not incredibly powerful, but at least it gives one option that a ranger can use. Later on, as the druid scales up in level, getting to level 15, 20, 25, and so on, those druid spells get more powerful, and Armor of Fate suddenly doesn't seem like a bad spell to have. Having a melee caster who is also able to cast cure poison spells. That's really good. Call Lightning is really good at higher levels. So you have a lot of different options for both protecting yourself and controlling the battlefield when you get the druidic spells. Finally, it should come to no surprise that a well-intentioned fighter should be restricted to being good. Well, okay, it comes with a little surprise. I find it very hard to believe that there were no evil archers or rangers out in the distance throughout humanity's long and varied history. But for the game, okay, fine, I'll let it be. Just keep in mind that a ranger and a paladin are both going to be locked at their reputation, or really they can't go under a certain reputation. Otherwise, they will fall. When a ranger or a paladin falls, they will lose a lot of their their specific ranger-based abilities. So they're going to lose the ability to cast druidic spells, to charm animal, big loss. They'll lose, and they'll lose their ability to hide. That means that when they fall, they basically become a very, very bad fighter, or a fighter who is required to just specialize in weapons, and they don't get the ability to become a Grandmaster, and they get nothing else. So if I were you, I would never fall as a ranger. Unless you're playing as some weird challenge, which I don't think is a good idea. Don't do that. Don't fall as a ranger, don't fall as a paladin. It's not good. So what you're getting when you get a ranger versus a fighter is you're getting a character who is going to have a little more staying power, a little bit more utility to be able to sneak around areas, and the trade-off is you're not going to be doing as much consistent physical damage. But you can make that up with certain druidic spells that can give you elemental damage. So I wouldn't consider the trade-off to be big offensive trade-off, but defensively it's not too bad. I think that rangers are a little bit challenging to play, especially for new gamers, and they want to be as cool as Aragorn and slice through enemies and go through enemies like crazy as a base ranger. You're not going to be able to do that as well as a fighter can. But it's still fun to play, and I think you should definitely give them a try. Now I'm going to take a little bit of time, go a little bit out of order to talk about the kits. The first kit to talk about is the Archer. Remember all those things I said about the Ranger versus the fighter, as the Ranger is not going to do as much physical damage? Well, this is the answer to that. The Archer is going to do a huge amount of physical damage at a range compared to even a fighter. First off, they get the big damage bonus that they get is going to be every 3 levels, they get a bonus to hit and to damage. That means very early on in the game, if you have watched any of my playthroughs, you know that playing solo at the early beginning of the game and getting yourself very, very powerful early on in the game before you gather your party, you can get up to level 5 or level 6 before you get to chapter 2 of Baldur's Gate 1. That means that you're getting a bonus to hit and to damage when you use any missile weapon. Not only that, but you can get Grand Mastery in longbows, short bows, and crossbows. Oddly enough, not in slings, which I think is kind of strange, but whatever. And that will furthermore enhance not just your damage, but also your attacks per round. They also get the ability to use the Called Shot ability, which allows them to specifically target a body part and to enhance the damage of their attacks, or to debuff their target, and it adds in each piece, each cumulative effect. -1 to the target's THAC0, -1 to target's ability to resist spells, -1 penalty to strength score, and a bonus to damage roll. All of those are really, really good, and the fact that they add in each spot, that's very powerful. It is an ability that lasts for 10 seconds, but with 10 seconds you can fire a good number of shots, especially if you're armed with a longbow or a short bow. Disadvantages: they can't charm animals. Sorry. I'm not brokenhearted over that. They can't charm a wolf. Boo-hoo. They also can't wear a huge amount of armor. Anything higher than studded leather armor they can't wear, but I think that's kind of part of the point of being an archer, right? Is that you're not going to be the person who's in the front line. That's what a paladin and a fighter will be. That's what a mage is going to be for using when they use stone skin and mirror image. don't have your mage at the front line. I'm just saying, in general, like, an archer is not supposed to be at the front line. It's supposed to be hanging back, dealing a huge amount of damage to opponents. And then finally, they only become proficient or put one spot into melee weapons. The way I like to start building my archers is put 2 points into either to one of the bows, and then finish off the third point of 2-weapon fighting, and then put the final point into one of the melee weapons, either flails or longswords, or axes. Any one of those should be fine. So for the archer, range damage is king. Put as many points into one of those bows as soon as you can, and just watch enemy opponents just completely wilt over and die. Make sure you get yourself some good arrows, make sure you get a good bow or a crossbow, and just have fun. This is one of the top damage classes that you can play in the game. It's actually a pretty easy class to play, and you'll be very, very powerful in no time. Archer is a really great class. It's a big improvement from the base Ranger, and it's just fun to play. So the next is the Stalker. The Stalker is, I'd like to think of the Stalker as someone who is a little more adept of being a fighter or thief without all of the utility of a thief, but with more staying power than a fighter thief would be able to have. So a Stalker, they're going to get a bonus to hiding in shadows. Of course, they can't wear any armor heavier than studded leather. Okay, that's a good trade-off. They get a bonus. They get a type of backstab damage where at the first few levels they get double the attack, then triple the attack from 9 to 16, and then quadruple the attack at level 17 up. That's pretty good for a character who's going to have a Thaco that's going to be like a warrior style Thaco. That's really good. Also considering that when you go into shadows and you hit from shadows, you're going to be doing more, you're going to have a better roll to hit than normal. So Stalkers are pretty awesome. Not only that, but they do get some level 3 mage spells that they can memorize. One of these is really good, Haste. I really like Haste. It allows for a lot of mobility. The other two are, you don't need them. You don't need them. Just get the Haste and have it, and you'll be able to use it at 12th level. Not bad. I really like Stalkers. I think Stalkers are a really fun class to play. You're not doing as much damage output unless you are sneaking in and out of combat, but they are just fun. Maybe not a great choice of the name, but definitely a class that is another improvement from the basic Ranger. So we've talked about the Archer and we've talked about the Stalker. Now it's time to talk about the Beastmaster. And the Beastmaster, you got some problems with the Beastmaster. First off, they can't use any metal weapons. So if you wanted to go into swords, halberds, warhammers, morningstars, axes, anything that could potentially use metal, you can't use that. That means you have a very limited choice of weapons that you can go with. That's just not good. That's not good. There are too many weapons out there that have metal as a component, and it's just not a great weapon selection. And considering it's supposed to be a warrior, it's supposed to be someone who is in the front line, this is a big disadvantage. Armor, you can't wear armor heavier than studded leather. That kind of goes with the rest of the Ranger kits, except for the fact that there's nothing here particular that actually feeds into that. Maybe the first advantage is that they do get a bonus to moving silently and hiding in shadows. Okay, sure, that's kind of nice. The other big benefit they're going to get is that they can use Find Familiar right away, and they can summon a familiar. When you cast Find Familiar, you can immediately have them kind of sit in your inventory and use up an inventory spot. In return, you get a big bonus to your HP. So, right off the bat, the Beastmaster will have more HP than any other character at level 1 in the game. More HP than a dwarven barbarian, right? They're going to have more HP than anybody else. They will have more HP than anybody else. That's okay, except for the fact that you're not getting the chance to use most of the really good weapons that you would want a frontline fighter to use. So, Beastmasters I just feel bad for. I just feel bad. They don't get a huge amount for that bonus. They can cast animal summoning. That's not a good trade-off. That's not a good trade-off at all. Animal summoning is not a powerful ability. At level 8, you get the ability to summon a dog. That's it. Level 12, you get the ability to summon a bear. I don't know. I just wish they had made them more powerful, and it just is not good. They've got the idea based off of the Beastmaster as an 80s kind of trope of being a man in the woods who fights evildoers who, I don't know, build swords or whatever, and they are like nature's warrior. And the problem is that they're not that good for this game. Feel free, if you really want to try out the Beastmaster, feel free. You are in for a real challenge though. That first disadvantage of not being able to use any metal weapons, you're gonna feel that right away, and it's not gonna be pleasant. So the kits to the Ranger, you get 2 really great kits, and then you have 1 kit that is a really big challenge, and the Ranger themselves is a realignment of what a Ranger should be, or what a fighter should be. They're not going to be doing as much physical damage, but they will have a few more protections and a little bit more weapon versatility. You have to be some form of good. I like that. That makes sense. Although I would say that that's pretty limiting. Like, I believe in Neverwinter Nights 2, there is a Ranger who is evil, and that to me makes a lot of sense. A person who just doesn't like anybody except for himself and being in the woods. To me, that makes sense. For ability scores, you're going to be wanting to put priorities into the physical stats just like a fighter should. The big difference is that you have a minimum for wisdom. Wisdom does not make any impact on the Ranger. It's just there to help out with basic druidic spell casting, and that's it. It doesn't need to be any higher than 14, but it has the minimum of 14. For the other physical stats, obviously you want to increase dexterity, you want to increase constitution, and you want to increase strength. You want to have the second value be as high as possible because that's exceptional strength. And if you saw my fighter video, I explained why exceptional strength is really good. And then if you have extra points left over, if you want to put them into wisdom, go right ahead. If you want to put them into intelligence to build up your lore score, you can do that. If you want to put it into charisma to enhance your prices, you can do that too. You have a lot of different options if you roll a high enough score. But the big thing is that you want to prioritize your physical stats. And just keep in mind that you have this wisdom score that needs to be a minimum of 14. As one final note, it says that the Constitution says this ability is important to a Ranger under Constitution. It's no more important than any other stat. I don't know why they put it there. A Ranger doesn't get any particular benefit, except they do have a minimum score of 14, which, I mean, that makes sense, but you should have it at 18. There's no reason to not have your Constitution score for a Ranger or a Fighter or a Paladin or a Monk be any lower than 18. There just isn't. It's same with Dexterity as well. You have a minimum of 13. So I suppose that's the interesting thing about Rangers is that they have minimum stats in all the physical stats, and it makes sense because they should have those physical stats be as high as possible. So I suppose that makes sense. But Wisdom doesn't have any particular piece to be higher or lower than anything else. It's just at a certain point because you need to cast druidic spells. And as a final kind of note about Wisdom, there is in fact one Ranger character that you can pick up, and I believe his Wisdom score is, I think, 9. So he is not necessarily bright. He is not known for his intelligence or his wisdom. His intelligence, in fact, is 6. So him having a low wisdom score makes no impact on his ability to be a Ranger. In fact, if I were rolling up his character, I'm stunned by the fact that he doesn't have more points into Dexterity or Constitution. If you've played the game, you know exactly the character who I'm talking about, and I'll move on from there. Next, let's go ahead and talk about the skills. As I've mentioned, they're going to get 4 points, and the maximum number of points that you'll be able to put into any of these as you're leveling up is 2 points. If you want to finish up the 3rd point into 2-weapon style, you could do that right at level 1 and immediately be a very good 2-weapon fighter. So what I like to do if I'm playing as a base ranger, I like to finish that off and then put 2 points into any weapon that I want to. In this case, I might put them into axes. That way I have both a ranged and a melee weapon capability. Or if I want to put it into one of the bow options, I can do that too. If you're playing as an archer, I would do something similar to that, except just switch between what I put 2 points into versus 1 point into. If I am playing as an archer, I would strongly recommend putting points into either crossbows or short bows. Longbows are really cool, but I think the strongest longbow that you can pick up in the game, I think, is a +3 longbow, maybe a +4 longbow. Compare that to a crossbow that you can pick up that is +4 and it can be made into a +5 weapon that automatically generates ammunition. Same thing with a short bow. There is a powerful short bow that can let you do the same thing. So I would prioritize one of those if you're playing as an archer. Otherwise, if you're playing as any of the other kits of ranger, you can go ahead and put points into any of the weapons you want to, unless you're a Beastmaster, which, enjoy quarterstaves and clubs, I guess. All rangers also get the ability to hide in shadows, move in shadows. I believe this automatically goes as you level up. I don't think you have to actively put points into it, but if you do, it's a choice between one or the other. I would say if you had to make that choice, prioritize hide in shadows versus move silently, because if you fail a move silently roll and you're already in shadows, you have 2 turns to get to someplace safe. This, by the way, is important for thieves to know. You have a little bit of time to get to someplace safe, and then you can try to hide in shadows again. That's my recommendation, but to each their own on how to play. Again, I'm almost positive that this automatically goes up as you level up. The other big thing that they get is the racial enemy, and if I were to give some recommendations as to what type of racial enemy I would choose, I wouldn't pick anything that you can kill easily in Baldur's Gate 1. Don't pick things like ettercaps, gibberlings, ogres, skeletons. Don't pick up any of those, because by the end of Baldur's Gate 1, you'll be done with them. And you'll be so powerful that you won't actually have the opportunity to really take advantage of this +4 bonus. You want to pick something that's really scary, right? So you scroll down to here. The final 3 are pretty good options. Elementals, you'll run into them throughout most of the game. I don't know, I find that they're pretty simple in having to fight, so I don't know how I would go with elementals, but they are throughout the entire game. So you're not going to be in a bad spot if you choose elementals, but really, it's these last 2 that are the best choices for a racial enemy. Demonic Fel, throughout the entire game. You could potentially fight demons in Baldur's Gate 1. So choosing Demonic Fel is really good because they have a wide range of spells and abilities that you'll have to fight against if you have to fight a demon. So going with Demonic Fel makes sense. Older versions of the game call this Outsiders, and while I love that, I think it's really kind of cool. Demonic Fel, it's the same thing. The other option I would go with are dragons. Now, dragons, you're not going to run into super frequently. This is not an enemy you're going to be fighting throughout all of the games, and in fact, I believe until you get to the end of Baldur's Gate 2, I think dragons are... Every dragon you come across, you could choose not to fight them. You can actively say, no, I'm not going to fight you, I'm going to solve this quest or handle this quest in another way, right? So dragons are a bit of an indulgence until you get to the end of Baldur's Gate 2, where you do run into one dragon that you do have to fight. Here's the thing. Dragons, they are very, very powerful in the fact that they are not just, massive giant monsters that come hurling at you and blowing their dragon's breath and clawing at you, right? They're almost always hastened, and they will always cast lots of spells at you. Dragons are very, very dangerous to fight. getting that bonus of +4 to hit and to damage them is something that is not to be scoffed at. So if you're playing as, for example, a ranger, and you're particularly trained in taking down dragons, having a +4 bonus to all of that, that's a pretty good use of an enemy. Don't waste this on trolls. Don't waste this on giant spiders or ogres or hobgoblins, right? On something that you can kill super easily in the first game. Don't do that. Just pick one of these bottom two, maybe elemental, maybe even, I would even choose shadows over things like hobgoblins, right? Because shadows can be kind of dangerous. But pick one of these two. They're the ones that are really scary and really worth your time into picking for a racial enemy. So that's going to be it for Rangers. Rangers have a different way of playing compared to a fighter. They're going to be less offensive, but a little bit more defensive. They're going to be less pure frontline fighter, because 3 of the good kits that you would choose, you don't want to have purely at the front lines for a long period of time, because they're not going to have the same level of AC. But the fact that you can have your druid cast Armor of Faith and then other powerful spells later on to protect their backside, while also using stealth to move in and out of combat, that's not bad. So Rangers are a challenge to play. They're not a bad class, but you're going to have to play them differently than you play a normal fighter. So feel free to give them a try. I think that they could be a lot of fun. Some of my favorite characters that I've created throughout the years have been Rangers, and I think I've spoken a little too harshly of them in the past. Except for Beastmasters. They're really a challenge, and you're really going to be hurting if you play as a Beastmaster. Just be ready. Be ready if you play as them. Well, be ready if you play as any of these characters. You know, this is Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition. It's not, you know, it's if you play on really high difficulties, it's not the easiest game to play. If you play on casual difficulties, it'll be a lot of fun, and it can be pretty easy to play. So in that case, go ahead and play as Beastmaster. Go ahead and play as a Ranger. Play as your heart's content. Do whatever you want. This is the modern world, and you are free to do what you want. As long as, you know, you're not stealing or hurting other people. Don't do that stuff. So with that, that's going to be it for today. Join me next week. We'll talk about another class. Until then, take care and good luck. We're all counting on you.